This is a Photoshop tutorial for how to do light and shadows. So first step is to download the files and then double click on it to unzip them. So you'll see a light and shadow tutorial.psd. That is your Photoshop file. Go ahead and double click on it and it will open. And then we have 3 other files here. They are PNGs, meaning they have a transparent background. So we're going to go ahead and select them all, drag them in, and just hit return on your keyboard. All right, now I'm going to drag this layer down to the bottom because it is my desert layer. And I'm going to double click and rename it Desert. And then this right here is I'm going to rename that layer Girl, and then Sword. So as you can see, there are 3 separate layers. There's a girl on a rock, a desert, and a sword. So what we're going to do is create an image with a glowing sword. We're going to make it glow blue. And then also I do want to add a shadow, because you can see that the girl herself is backlit from something that's coming from here. And for that reason, we don't see a really huge shadow. We don't see a shadow at all, actually, on the rock. But in the image I chose with the desert, there's a huge moon behind her. So even though some of this lighting that we see on her face could still work, there would be shadows coming this way. So we're going to go ahead and add a shadow as well. But step 1 is let's position the sword and make it glow. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. If you do not have a navigator open, go to Window, Navigator, and then it's going to appear like this. What you want to do is click in this gray area between the tabs and then this drop down menu. Just click and drag until the blue rectangle appears and then just drop it in. You can zoom in and out this way as well to your workspace. All right, so I'm going to select the sword layer, Command T to transform to scale it. So I'm going to go ahead and make it smaller. That way it fits into her arm. Maybe a little bit larger than life is okay. So I'm going to position it like that, hit return, and then I'm going to zoom in. You can either use your magnifying tool or hold down Z on your keyboard and just click in with your mouse. So with this hand position, this is her thumb, I guess. It would kind of be over the sword. So I'm going to come in here and kind of trace it. And I'm tracing it with the polygonal lasso tool. This is the polygonal lasso tool. So if you click and hold over it, it is the 3rd tool down. So I have the thumb selected, and now I'm going to come over here in my sword layer in my layers window and click this layer mask. And as you can see, it masked out the wrong part. So if you click on the mask itself, which is the black and white part, and just do Command I on a Mac, it inverts it. So now it looks like it's actually holding the thumbs on top of it. It is a little weird looking, but we can fix that later using shadows. All right, the next step is we're going to make this sword glow blue. So what I'm going to do is come in here and select just the metal part. Command C to copy, Command V to paste. I'm going to come in here and paste it on top, and then I'm going to do Command B on a Mac. And I'm going to make it blue. Something like that. Color levels, -100, 0, +46. I'm going to rename it Blue Sword. And then, so now the metal is blue, but now I actually have to create a blue glow. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click the original sword layer, hit the plus beside the trash can to create a new layer. I'm going to call it Blue Glow. And now I'm going to come over here in my colors. I'm going to select a bright blue. Maybe something like that. The hex code is 17B5FF. Click OK. I'm going to come in here with my polygonal lasso tool. And you can see there's an option for feather. I'm going to change this to 60. And then I'm going to come in here and just roughly trace the outline of this sword. And notice I'm making it a lot larger than the sword itself. And down here, I'm kind of doing this thing. Okay, and then you can see that it creates kind of a glow, like it created rounded edges. Next step, take the paint bucket tool and just paint inside of it. And you can see that it created a glow. Command D on a Mac to deselect. I'm going to move that layer on top. And then I'm going to change the filter to, let's do screen. Opacity, I'm going to change the opacity to 88. And then I'm going to create a layer mask and come in here and just brush away some of this stuff where the handle is. So I'm going to change my opacity to 44. Since the mask is white, I need to be painting with black. So I'm going to come in here. And first I'm going to zoom in a little so I can see what I'm doing. So realistically, if this was glowing, then this side of that handle would not be glowing. The finger, the thumb would, but that side would not be glowing. And down here, there would be a shadow. So I'm going to make my brush smaller. Hardness is 0%. That's okay. I'm going to come in here and just start brushing stuff away. Make sure you have the brush selected, not your pencil. Hardness is 0. Going to make my size smaller. To make it your brush size smaller or larger, you just hit the brackets beside the P on your keyboard. Change the opacity to 44%. Make sure you have the brush selected, not the pencil or any of the other brushes. And then come in here and start brushing it away. So actually what I'm going to do is make my brush larger and just remove all of this glow. And then I'm going to manually draw it back in. And then I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger and come in here and just narrow down the glow a little bit so it's not like spilling out, so it doesn't look fake. Next step, you can see now we have a glow layer. Next step, go ahead and create a new layer. And I'm going to come in here, make my brush smaller. Get the brush tool, make my brush smaller. I'm going to change my opacity to 11. And now I'm going to come in here and draw some highlights. So just over where the light would hit it, I'm just going to come in here and brush it. Because there's going to be a higher concentration of blue light over here because it's basically blocking the light from hitting her arm or the rest of the handle. And then I'm going to come over here and add some blue highlights on her thumb. And notice I'm changing the brush size from smaller to larger as I go. Highlighting just the edges. And realistically, this sword would make her like leg a little bit blue as well. Like there would be a glow on her leg. And even her garments. Her boots. going to make my brush a little bit larger. Just a little bit smaller to get some details. And then I'm going to, let's see, add a layer mask, and then I'm going to clean up some of these edges. So again, my mask is white, which means I need to be painting with black ink. I'm going to come in here and remove some of these other highlights. I'm going to change my opacity to 44. The reason I'm changing the opacity is so I don't get any harsh edges. There you go, it's cleaning it up a little bit. I'm going to call this layer Blue Highlights. Blue Highlights 1. And then I'm going to create another layer. Let's take the Blue Highlights layer, change it. Let's see what the screen look like. Color dodge, lighten color. No, I'm going to keep it normal. But maybe down here I need to clean up the edges a little bit because it's too harsh of a blue highlight. So let's make this a little bit softer. I'm going to change this to 11 again. That way I don't take away too much. And just blend it in a little bit. Blend it in. Okay, now in this new layer that I created, I'm going to come in here. This one I'm going to change to screen. And then I'm going to come in here and then a little bit add some blue. Just a little bit. Again, we're trying to make this as realistic looking as possible. And I'm going to come in here and brush over the sword more, because if it was glowing a blue light, we would barely see a ton of details. We can keep a little bit of it, but I want to come in here for blue light and even paint over the sword more. I'm going to change my opacity to 44%. And keep painting so it looks like the sword is glowing. The closer the light is, like for example, if this blade is glowing, the closer we get to the blade, the more concentrated the glow would be. And I'm going to come in here and actually highlight her arm a little bit. You can see it's too much. Going to spread it out a little bit. And then again, create a layer mask and brush away part of it. Because you don't want to overdo it so it looks fake. The secret to great Photoshop composite is that nobody even notices you did any Photoshop work. You can also take your smudge tool and like smudge some of this color to get it to bend. Okay, so there we can see, I'm going to call this Blue Highlight 2. And if I take all of these layers and select them, if you click the bottom one, hold down Shift, click the top one, click and drag them into the folder, you can see the before and after, and it looks legit like her sword is actually glowing. I'm going to rename the layer Blue Glow. All right, and make sure you save your file, Command S to save on a Mac. All right, so the next step, you know what, we should actually add some highlights on the rocks as well, but I'm not going to go into detail with that, but you should add some highlights on the rocks. But now I'm going to show you how to do a shadow. So realistically, if this is a light source back here and it's hitting her face, we would see shadows coming this way. So what I'm going to do is select the girl layer, right click, duplicate layer, and then I'm going to hide the original one. The reason I'm duplicating it is that way if I hate what I did, I have something to go back to. And then next, I'm going to come in here and actually cut out the rock. So I'm going to select my polygonal lasso tool and just come in here, roughly trace the rock, come in close to get the very edge where her foot is. I'm tracing along the edge of the boots and the stone. Command, oops, I need to change my feather. So make sure we change our feather back to 100%, or actually back to 0. Come in here and go ahead and trace it. I'm tracing at the edge of her boots and the rock. My goal here is to separate the layers. Okay, now we have it selected. I'm going to do Command X. Command X deletes that area, but it also copies it at the same time. And then Command V to paste. Select your move tool, move the rock down where it needs to be. All right, so there we go. I'm going to rename that layer rock. Okay, so now we have a girl and we have a rock. The rock, the color of it doesn't really match this scene. So either I color my background a little bit with blue shadows, or I change my rock. And I think the correct thing to do is change the rock, because if you look at her, she doesn't really have any blue shadows. So first thing I'm going to do is color balance this rock. So Command B. And it's really the highlights that I'm concerned about. I mean, the shadows. I mean, the highlights are a little bit too orange. So we can come in here and maybe, let's see what happens if we add blue. No. So let's add a little bit of yellow. Add a little bit of red. Okay, that actually looks pretty good. It is still a lot more yellow than the desert. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. I'm going to come in here in my desert layer. Command B for balance, and I'm going to give it some red. There we go. I'm going to move this out of the way. You can see the before and after. It looks a lot better. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Command Z to undo. So that's the original. Shift Command Z to redo. So it looks like it fits a lot better. It matches. It feels like it's starting to fit into the same scenario. So now I want to go ahead and select the girl. And I'm going to come over here down at the bottom where it says FX, click, scroll all the way to the bottom and click Drop Shadow. I'm going to move this angle up so it's coming straight down, because again, the moon is straight behind her, so the shadow should start coming straight down. Distance, 27, spread, 22, size 40. That's great. The color, I'm going to make the color the same color as these dunes. That way it looks more natural, like the darkest part of these dunes is the color we should use. So I'm doing like a very dark gray. Click OK, and then click OK. And now you can see, like, it created a drop shadow of the layer. It treated the layer as if it was a 2D layer, and it created a drop shadow. Now we need to take that drop shadow and actually make it look like it's hitting the rocks. Because realistically, it would be coming here down over the rocks, not doing this drop shadow thing that it's doing. So what we need to do is separate the layer. So with the girl layer selected, go to Layer, Layer Style, Create Layer. Some aspects of the effects cannot be reproduced. Hit OK. And then you can see it created a separate layer for the shadow. And it's awesome because it follows the silhouette of the girl. So with the girl's drop shadow selected, I'm going to go ahead and do Command T to transform. Click and drag, or hold down Shift, click and drag this point down. Selected, I'm going to move the rock below her shadow, that way we can see it. Zoom in a little bit. The girl shadow selected, I'm going to do Command T to transform. Hold down Shift and click this little handle here and just drag it down. Kind of like this. And rotate it. We're trying to match up the feet a little bit. Hit return. It doesn't look real because it's not wrapping around the rock, so that's our next step to make it wrap. But you can see, like, some places, like right here, it's not quite where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to select my smudge tool and I'm going to smudge this layer to extend it. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to duplicate this layer. Because it's a complicated shadow, I'm going to have a backup of it. All right. So there we go. There's the shadow. So now you can see that the rocks have a crevice. So I have to come in here and just warp this layer so it like matches the rocks. So what I'm going to do is come over here to edit, puppet warp, and come in here and actually pin some of these areas down. And then other areas you can take and just stretch them a little bit. If you click and drag, you can like manipulate the shadow. So I'm going to click and drag, make sure you create the original pin. And then come over here and you kind of want to warp it to fit how it naturally would if it was if the shadow was going over these rocks. So over here, if this shadow is going this way, realistically, this shadow would kind of go this way too. So I can come over here and start manipulating some of these shadows. And this one I really need to move out of the way. Like, maybe we'll see the cape, maybe not. So I'm going to come in here and manipulate the rock, because the rock is round. So I need to take these shadow points and manipulate how the light would curve, the shadow would curve on the rock. This shadow right here, maybe we see it, maybe not. I'm going to take this point and extend it a little bit. Come in here, drag this off. I don't think we would see much of the cape at all. But this shadow over here needs to be tucked in. All right. So go ahead and hit return. And you can see original shadow, final shadow. So it wraps the rock much better. But now it does look a little bit fake, so we have to come in here and play around with it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create a layer mask. And my mask is white, so I need to brush with the black brush tool. Select your brush tool. And I'm going to change my opacity to 22. And I'm going to come in here and some of the areas I'm going to make lighter, some darker. So over here you can see that there's a little bit of a highlight on the rock. I'm going to brush away part of it, brush back more of it. To brush back, just change your color back to white. And the keyboard shortcut on a Mac is X. I'm just highlighting some of these like rock formations, because realistically parts of the shadow, if you look at a shadow, parts would be lighter, part would be darker. So we want to make it look like it's actually like legit wrapping on this rock. And further away, it would fade a little bit. Like it wouldn't be as potent. Like it would gradually fade away. So I'm making my brush a lot larger and just coming in here and just brushing parts of the shadow away. I still think this angle is wrong. So I'm going to come in here, make sure you have this layer selected, edit, puppet warp, and I need to move it. Keep this, pin that, we'll come in here, oops, Command Z, pin the shadow over here as well, then come over here and rotate it. This one I would keep, so I'm going to pin it here. This one needs to be rotated a little. Hit return. That feels a lot better. Again, come back here in the layer mask. Select your brush tool. I'm going to make it a lot smaller. I'm going to change my opacity to 9. And I'm going to come in here, zoom in, and just brush some of these highlights just to remove a little bit of the shadow over the highlights. Just manipulate the edge of the shadow a little bit. It looks like this one right here, the shadow needs to be extended because the rock actually comes up over here. So I'm going to click X to paint back the shadow here. Change the opacity to 100. I'm going to select my smudge tool, select this layer, come in here and smudge it up. And I'm actually going to take my shadow, move it on top of the girl, because you can see that there's a weird crack. So I'm going to move it on top of the girl, smudge it in so it lines up. And the shadows, like everywhere else, I mean, they're contrasted, but they're kind of soft. So there we go. So now it looks like the shadow is hitting this way. I'm going to remove this part of it because it's weird how abrupt it is. Make sure you have the brush tool selected. I'm going to remove this part because it's kind of weird how it just kind of hits the rocks. And maybe a little bit of that as well. Okay, so next I'm going to come in here and add a little bit more contrast to her because the dunes, they have a very dark, their shadow side is dark, and I feel like we need to blend where the shadow and her feet meet. We need to blend it in more. Also, I can smudge this one up a little bit. Let's select the shadow layer, smudge it up a little bit into the leg. That feels better. And notice I'm like following the curve of her calf. This one, smudge it up. Smudging up the shadow a little bit more. Okay, and now with the brush tool, let's brush out some of these edges. I'm just cleaning up the edges over here a little bit, and then I'm going to make my brush larger and change my opacity to 33%. The reason I make it 33 is that way we have a nice clean transition so we don't get like harsh lines. So I feel like this one, I did it too much to the point where we can't see the transition between the leg and the rock. There we go. Okay. Next step, you can see it turning this on and off. I brought the shadows up. Next step, I'm going to right click, duplicate the girl. And this time I'm going to do Command L for levels because I'm going to make her darker. And you just take this middle piece and drag it. And the reason because I'm making her darker is because, again, I feel like the transition, like the shadows of the dunes, are a lot harsher than the ones on her. So make her darker, hit OK. You can zoom out so you can see. And then you can click the eyeball to see the before and after. And the reason I duplicated this layer and made it darker instead of just painting black over it is for the detail. If I just paint black over it to make the shadows or stretch this shadow out, it's not as realistic as if I actually change the darkness of the layer. But I don't want it dark everywhere, so I'm going to now select this layer that I made dark, create a mask on it, and I'm going to come in here with my brush tool, painting black, opacity 33, that's fine. I'm going to come in here and just brush away parts of it that I want to keep the original color. And again, I'm brushing away areas that would be affected by the moon hitting her. Like this back leg, it can be dark like that and then blend into the shadow, that's fine. Over here, her cape, brushing away part of it. Her hair. This cape, I'm brushing away this side of it because it would be lit up a little bit with the yellow moon. And you can click hide and unhide. You can see it makes it a lot more dramatic, and it makes it like fit, like match the shadows of the dunes. All right, and then my last step will be coming here with the blue glow and actually add some more, even over here over the rocks, a little bit, multiply, make it screen, zoom in. If you click the smudge tool and just smudge it around a little, it makes it a lot softer. Select the mask, brush away areas. And I'm going to try to see what it looks like if I multiply it normal. I think I'm going to keep it normal actually. So I'm going to select my wand tool, come over here, have the rock layer selected, click outside of it so I get a nice edge, and then come over here in that new blue glow layer I just created. Select my brush. Change my opacity to 100. Make sure you have the mask layer selected. You're painting with black. And brush away the edges. And then I'm going to do Shift-Command-I to invert the selection. And then with my white, I'm going to paint back some of this blue edges. So I'm trying to get those nice blue edges. And then select the actual layer itself. Come in here, oops. Change the opacity to 10. Come in here and draw some of the blue highlights. Just gently. And you can see where the area, like where the sun hits it. I mean, we're just really trying to create some blue from that sword glow. Command D to deselect. And I think it's too bright, so we're going to change the opacity to 66. And I'm going to come in here and clean up these edges a little bit. Hardness is 0, opacity is 10, good. Make sure you're painting with white. Nope, you need to be painting with black. Make sure you're painting with black. Because I'm just trying to add a little bit, just highlights where the blue light would hit from the sword. Notice I didn't put any blue light over the shadow. All right, and there we go. To get rid of this white outline, you can come in here. Let's see if we lock the layer. Does it get rid of it? Get rid of this white outer edge. You can do Command T on the desert layer. Command T just to make it a tiny bit larger. That's it. You don't want to make it too much larger, just large enough to get rid of the white edge. And I'm nudging it with the arrows on my keyboard. Return to set it, and then we can lock it. I'm going to select all of these layers, put it into a folder, and then so you can see the before and after. So that's the before, that's the after. I'm going to select all of these layers and put it into a folder. That way you can see the before and after. I'm going to turn the girl on. So that's the before and that's the after. Next, we want to come in here, select our sword layer with the move tool, and we're going to right click, duplicate it. Hit return. And then with the duplicated one, let's go ahead and do Command L. We're going to make it darker as well to fit the lighting. You can see it has a little bit of an edge. Let's see if we can get rid of that quick. So I selected it with the magic wand and then click delete, but it's saying I could not because it's a smart object. So this little symbol right here means it's a smart object. All you have to do to make it an editable object is right click and rasterize layer. Then I can click delete, and then I'm going to select the other layer underneath, select the mask and click delete on it too. Let's see. Yeah, it actually looks a lot better. So now I'm going to select the layer underneath, click delete, and I have to make that right click rasterize layer as well, delete that white edge, Command D to deselect, click delete, Command D to deselect, no. I'm going to right click and duplicate this other layer. And now I'm going to hide the original layer so you can see it's a lot better, removing part of the white outline. And then it looks a lot better being darker, but I feel like it could be even more darker. I'm going to right click, duplicate it again. Command L, let's make it darker again. Something like that. And then I'm going to do Command, well, let's see. Gosh, if we duplicate it, it adds a white edge. I'm going to select the layer, come in here, select my burn tool, and I'm going to come in here and just burn some of it to make it darker. Also, I feel like the edge is way too sharp right now, so I'm going to come in here with my blur tool and just blur the edge just a little bit so it looks like it's actually that the thumb is on top of it so we don't get such sharp edges. All right, that looks better. This part is a little bit too blue, so I'm going to come in here, sponge tool, a little bit, remove some of the saturation. Wow, that made it even worse. So it looks like that blue might actually be part of the glow. Yeah, it is. So I'm going to come in here and mask away some of that with the brush tool. That's better. That's more realistic looking. And selecting your move tool, let's come back to the sword and back to the burn tool. I'm going to come in here and burn it even more. And then here, make it darker. And then next, I'm going to click a layer, add a layer underneath. You know what? Actually, it can be on top. That's fine. I'm going to create a layer on top. I'm going to change the color to one of these really dark browns. Change it to darken or multiply. Opacity, I'm going to do 22. I'm going to come in here and just draw some shadows in. Because realistically, there would be some shadows here. The thumb would cast a shadow over the handle, and there would be a shadow in here that the sword would cast on the arm. And the blue light would definitely cast a shadow over here on the handle. So that's what I'm trying to create right now. More realistic looking shadow. You can see I kind of overdid it. I'm just going to take my eraser tool and with my hardness at 53, come in here and erase some of it. Okay. So we can see the before and after. We turn this other layer on. So there's the before, there's the after. Looks a lot more realistic.